If you could walk us through your entire interview process at Google as a finance analyst.
Yeah, I think that was the most nervous I've ever been at an interview while giving my interview for Google because, growing up, you hear things about like Google, the interviews are so hard. But I think I had a great set of like interviewers who made sure like I felt extremely
I want
comfortable.
to understand what was the most challenging part of the interview, which you kind of felt like maybe I could have prepared better, or if you could share, your experience on that.
I think because of Amazon, I was very confident about the behavioral questions because I had those 8 to 10 scenarios that I mentioned and I had practiced those. So that part I was very confident about. The part that I was nervous about is the questions that you have to like figure out on the spot because those are the ones that get you thinking on the spot.
I've also interviewed few folks, and sometimes it happens they don't think and they don't ask a relevant follow-up question, and they jump into answers so quickly, and they just mess up with the interview. So
I think Google as a company has been wonderful to work with. Something that I found, everybody over here is obviously like busy. They want to like do their job and they want to do it their best. But they've been extremely welcoming. So when I came in, everybody was so open to like introduce themselves, come forward, and then kind of like embrace a new person on their team. They were happy to do like one-on-ones. I was very surprised when my like introduction email went out. A lot of folks like preemptively were like, hey, like we may be in like different teams, but I'm happy to like do a one-on-one. One thing culturally that I noticed for Google is like everybody is one, extremely like intelligent and also extremely tenured here within Google. I think one basic difference between the two companies, like culture, obviously, right? Like we all know how like Amazon and Google's culture, like work cultures are different. Um, and it's not to say like one is better over the other. It's what you see as a good fit. I had my director at Amazon who had worked for like 8+ years, which is a long time for Amazon, but then that's just kind of the culture that he thrived in, that environment. So again, it's not to say one is better over the other. I just felt like because I said I have a very young family, the Google's culture was a more like a better fit for me. So like the good work-life balance.
hi, Heta. Welcome on Narratives of Numbers. I am so happy to have you in our podcast today. So, in today's podcast, we are going to focus on Heta's journey, like, how she began her career in finance sector altogether. And then we'll deep dive, try to understand, like, her journey as a finance analyst. So, Heta, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, hi Amrita. Thanks first of all for having me on this podcast. This is absolutely so special, and I'm very much eager to like share my journey with you and all of your listeners. A little bit about myself. Hi, Heta, and I've been in the finance world for a little over 10 years now. Um, Education wise, I got my education in India. So undergrad was in India, Mumbai University, NM College, and then for my master's when I moved to United States. So I got my MBA from NJIT. I did my MBA in finance over there, and then while I was on the East Coast, I worked. So I started pretty much like at the bottom of the chain. So I started off as an accounts receivable specialist, and then moved on from there. So I worked there for a little bit. And from there, I moved to Washington State, where I started off as an accountant at this company called Enterprise. You may have heard of it, the rental car company. So that was a great, like, first, like, real job experience in America, where I got to experience what, like, accounting feels like, and how do we, like, maintain books, all of that. From there, I worked for a mid-sized company called Keywords. it was a tech company that did game testing. So very interesting space to work in. And that's when I did like a hybrid financial analysis role. So first 2 weeks of the month, I would do like accounting, standard accounting, like accruals and journal entry, all of that. And then second half of the month I would focus on like financial analysis, so like consolidation of all the numbers, and then having those reviews with leadership, so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about keywords. And then from there on is when I got my job at Amazon, which was a very traditional FP&A role. Over there I worked for a team called Global Specialty Fulfillment. Was there in Amazon for about 2.5 years. And then I found this opportunity here at Google. So that's a little bit about my like professional education background. I also have two little kids, one 6-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, that fill my life with lots of joy and laughter. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that is awesome. First of all, many congratulations on all your achievements. Specifically, I would like to say there are so many folks who would like to work with Amazon and Google. It's a big brand. So has it ever happened like, you kind of get a head turn when you say like, okay, I work with Google. Like, have you seen people, oh, you work at Google and you getting some special attention like that, Ether?
I mean, of course, right? I think like ever since you like start on this journey, you aspire to work for these like big tech companies. Especially since I moved here in like Seattle, I always looked up to people that did, and it's kind of a brand name that goes along with you. I think something that I'm like been very conscious of lately is. As amazing as this opportunity has been, of course, I've had a lot of people to thank for who have helped me get here, but also like being conscious of like, I don't want it to be my identity, like that I'm working for Google. Yes, of course, like there are a lot of like perks that come with it. But what am I without this role? So I think about that a lot, and how this experience is shaping my life is also something that I like to think about a lot. So yeah, for sure.
Awesome. But yeah, I also wanted to understand, Hita, like you did mention you have two kids. So how is your journey has been like balancing your personal and professional life?
Yeah, I think I have like no one else but my husband to thank for. He's been an excellent like partner in all of this, and of course I couldn't have done this without him. Luckily, I also have like my parents over here that live with me. So it's a teamwork for sure. That's why in the beginning when I said it's not just me, and a lot of people have contributed to me being here. I think it's definitely my family, and my husband who's been a trooper.
Hita, you could walk us through your entire interview process at Google as a finance analyst.
Yeah, I think that was the most nervous I've ever been at an interview while giving my interview for Google, because, growing up, you hear things about like Google, the interviews are so hard. But I think I had a great set of like interviewers who made sure like I felt extremely comfortable. So overall, about a little bit about the process is, depending on what position you're applying for, you'll have about like 4 to 5 rounds. I had 4 rounds. So first one was the HR round, where I met with the recruiter, and then recruiter asked me questions about just basic questions to see if it's a fit. She asked me questions about like, what am I looking for in my next role? What am I doing currently? And if she should even like pass me on to any of the hiring managers. So that was the first set. That happened. Then within a couple of weeks, I found out that she was interested in pursuing my application further. And then my interview was confirmed. I had initially interviewed for Google Cloud, but now I do work for the Devices and Services group. But all my interview panel was from Google Cloud. But the nature of the interview is they're trying to figure out like three overarching skills, and that is role related knowledge, then your cognitive ability, and then third is googliness. So role related knowledge is like your tactical knowledge, like do you even have the basic skills to perform a role. um, So they assess that through like asking you questions about your current role and your experience. What is it that you bring to the table? So, and that's very common in like a lot of the different places that you interview with. So that's the first kind. The cognitive ability is they're basically trying to see like how what approach is it that you take to solve any problems basically. So they'll give you like hypothetical scenarios uh, and they could be like real life scenarios, something that has happened or they expect would happen on the role. So it's not something completely unrelated to your position. So that's the second type of questions. And third is googliness. At least in my experience, they didn't directly ask me questions about googliness, but over here they're trying to see like, what is your attitude? Like, what are your cultural values, and do these fit with Google's culture? So those were like the few initial things. Within like googliness, they'll say like, do you have like intellectual humility? Are you a fun-loving and playful person? Like if somebody reached out to you, would you be willing to help them? Those are the kind of things that they assess. And like I said, they won't ask you questions, but then you sort of like emulate those qualities when you give those answers, when you're answering like all the different interviewing questions. Like, are you conscious? Are you judicious? Like, at least, like, since I'm finance, they ask me a lot of questions about like, how did you like save, money? Like, how did you save dollars for your company in your past roles? Those kind of things. Are you a collaborative team player? Do you communicate well? So yeah, these are like the three overarching themes that they touch upon through um, um, you know uh, different interviewing questions.
This was your second step, like after HR call. So it was your directly like hiring manager, or it was kind of a panel kind of an interview?
It was a panel. So and none of the three people were my hiring manager, because I interviewed for a different group than what I had than what I like got matched with. So the first step is you'll have a call with a recruiter, then you have it with a panel, and then the fourth one is where you'll have a match. So if your hiring manager wasn't a part of the panel, they'll just have a casual conversation like you and I are having today, and they'll see if we're a good fit. So then that was the fourth element to my interview.
Okay. That's interesting. That's a good, very good information, I will say. So it
Yeah.
was like a behavioral question, how it was like completely behavior. As you mentioned, like they gave you a particular situation, like, if putting you through and then you had to just explain those. So how was your preparation strategy for that, Hita? Like, did you refer any, I would say, study material? Like, because understanding every company has their own culture and values, so they definitely want to drill the candidates on those aspects and parameters. So if you could walk us through, like, the kind of material or any website, like kind of information you referred, or you had any friends who kind of helped you in this interview process.
My answer to that is all of the above. So yes, definitely. So the way I started, and my friends had actually guided me through this. My friends and family had guided me through this, where what I did was you take about 8 to 10 scenarios, which are very unique, 8 to 10 scenarios that you're like particularly proud of from your experience. And that could be your most recent role, or your past experience of like, 4 or 5 years. So you take 8 to 10 scenarios that you're very proud of. And then you kind of keep them in your like memory bank, or like keep them ready. And based on the questions that they ask, you like pull out each of the examples and then tweak it if need be, and then kind of try to fit it into the in the questions that they're asking. um, Now, something you want to make sure is that you're not repeating the same example over and over again in the same interview or with like different panelists, because one thing that they do is all your entire panel will get together, will have a meeting once you've completed your loop, and then they'll discuss the answers that you've given. So you don't want it to look like you have limited experience. So you want to try to have like 8 to 10, so that if your interviewer asks you like 4 or 5 questions, you have like a little bit of variety to add in. Um, So that was one of the questions, one of the strategy that I used. You spoke about resource. One of the resource that I highly recommend that I use was Jeff H. Sipe. And he does a lot of, I think he's an ex-Googler, and he does a lot of videos on how to answer those questions. And the format that he usually uses is CFAS, which is when they give you like hypothetical questions, ask them C, which is clarifying questions, F, that's framework. So prepare a framework around the answer you're going to provide. Give them your assumptions, that like if they haven't given you like a full picture, ask them questions, because that's also something that they're judging you as to, like, are you asking the right questions if I give you ambiguous scenarios. And then the place where you want to focus the most on is the solution, that this is the problem statement, what is the solution that I'm providing. So that's the format for the hypothetical questions. For the behavioral questions, the format my friends and family had shared with me, and it doesn't come naturally, is the STAR method. So situation, task, action, and result. And then again, even in this format, you focus a lot on the action that you took and then the result you provided. So yeah, I did use a lot of resources. I think Jeff H. Sipe, all of his content on YouTube. I think I was listening to it on like loop for like 2-3 days at stretch. So would highly recommend him as a resource. And then again, practicing the responses, because the STAR method is not how we generally speak in. So just practicing those. So yeah.
Okay, Hita. And I want to understand how much time did it take to do the preparation?
Yeah, I think they give a lot of, the recruiter had given me lots of information ahead of time. Even Google's career website has a lot of good information, and the recruiter will also send you good, relevant information. Now, it depends for each candidate. For me, it was the case that I had a recruiter interview, which was kind of the screening call. And from there on, I had a couple weeks to prepare. So that was ample time. But for a lot of people, and then the 3 interviews that I had, all of those 3 interviews happened back to back to back with like a 15-minute gap. So there were 45-minute interviews, 3 interviews, and then with a 15-minute gap in the middle. So for some, depending on the the panel's availability, they'll space it out depending on their, availability.
Okay, and the final interview, you had a gap between your final interview, like the matching process.
Yeah, the matching process again. So after I went through my loop, I had about 10-ish days before I went to the final portion of it.
Okay, and then when did you hear that you're being selected? I'm sure that must be a very special day for you.
It was. I've heard that a lot of people, it has taken time, but I think I interviewed at a good time because they were really in need of someone. So I heard back in like within a week. So
So did you go through a referral process, Hita, or you just applied by yourself?
I didn't. I was working at Amazon at the time. So the recruiter had reached out to me on LinkedIn. So that's another resource that I actively use. Like I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If I'm not searching for jobs, always make sure like I'm keeping my information up to date on LinkedIn. And then you do have this feature on LinkedIn where you say that you're open for positions. So I had that feature activated, and somehow that got triggered to the recruiter, and she had reached out that they were hiring in the Kirkland location, and she presented to me a few opportunities, and that's kind of how the process began.
But yeah, that's awesome. Like, because as you were mentioning it, like, usually, like, I have seen the process of Google is a little slow with the recruitment process. So usually they take a lot of time because I have been hearing from other folks as well. So I think in that ways you got pretty lucky. Like everything kind of like, went so smooth and then you got the big news. So Hita, I want to understand what was the most challenging part of the interview, which you kind of felt like maybe I could have prepared better, or if you could share, your experience on that.
I think because of Amazon, I was very confident about the behavioral questions because I had those 8 to 10 scenarios that I mentioned, and I had practiced those. So that part I was very confident about. The part that I was nervous about is the questions that you have to like figure out on the spot, because those are the ones that get you thinking on the spot. And then, of course, you're nervous. You're sitting in front of a panel, so you're like it's harder than you think. So that's the part that I was asked a question about. Oh, like you're about to go in a review with leadership, and then just 5 minutes before the review, you find out that some of the information, your assumptions that you've used, has changed. What would you do? And just the scenario in itself, I'm like, oh my gosh, like that it gives you almost like a panic attack. Um, but then I had to go in asking clarifying questions, like I'd heard on Jeff's videos. So I asked questions like, "Oh, like how important is this assumption that has changed? Like, would it, change my numbers drastically?" The interviewer said, "Yes, it would change your number drastically. What would you do in that situation?" So it's not normal that we do this in a conversation, but it is acceptable to do this in an interview. Is to tell them that I'm taking like a minute gap to collect my thought. I had like a pen and paper with me. So you kind of like jot down your thoughts. And then I gave him an answer like accordingly. So that was the part that I thought was, oh, like what would I do in this scenario? So I basically just told him that I will go into the leadership saying that these numbers are based on the assumption XYZ. Now, right before walking into this presentation, I understand that these assumptions have changed. These are the XYZ numbers that it will impact. So I will take X amount of time, go back, and then rework and come back to it. So I think, yeah, that's always the part that, kind of uh, catches you off guard and that I was nervous about.
And that's pretty much obvious. I think this is a very valid point which happens. I think most of us have faced that issue because you have certain scenarios which is right you what you have prepared, and something comes up which you are not very sure of and you don't know whether this is going to fit. And it's absolutely fine to take a break instead of just jumping into things and just making it
Yeah,
look more bad. So I think that makes more sense for some time, because you see I have also interviewed few folks and sometimes it happens they don't think and they don't ask a relevant follow-up question, and they
yeah,
jump into answers so quickly, and they just mess up with the interview.
yeah,
So my advice to our audience would be like, when you come across that situation, take a pause, ask relevant question, and then get your thoughts together and then answer your question.
yeah. I 100% would agree to that.
So Heather, how does Google's approach as a finance analyst it's different from the other company which you have worked in your prior experience?
I think, yeah, I think it's not any different than any of like the top tech companies that you think of. They're all very data-driven approaches, right? They are very keen on understanding the data whenever they are making decisions. So that is like one underlying theme that's common amongst at least the two companies that I work with. But what sets them apart is I was recently in a meeting with my VP, and something she said like stuck with me. What the scenario was that we were talking about like an expansion project, and then that required like a mass cross-functional level initiative. So we were telling her that, oh, the VP of like operations and VP of supply chain and whatnot thinks this, that we should like hold or we should go ahead with the project. And she said, that's great. Like, I don't doubt their business acumen or business decision, but I don't want emotions. I want data behind all of this. So that's exactly how they take decisions here at Google or any of the top companies that you work with. It's a strictly data driven approach. And You have to be well versed with your data when you do any presentation to leadership, or if you're trying to like make any decision, it has to first make sense number wise.
So as per your experience, it's majorly it's data driven. It's just a company's culture where you have to fit in and you have to meet different kind of people and understand and drive that.
Exactly.
So are there any unique aspect, about Google's culture where which you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think Google as a company has been wonderful to work with. Something that I found, everybody over here is obviously like busy. They want to like do their job and they want to do it their best. But they've been extremely one welcoming. So when I came in, everybody was so open to like introduce themselves, come forward, and then kind of like embrace a new person on their team. They were happy to do like one-on-ones. I was very surprised when when my like introduction email went out. A lot of folks like preemptively were like, hey, like we may be in like different teams, but I'm happy to like do a one-on-one. One thing culturally that I noticed for Google is like everybody is one extremely like intelligent and also extremely tenured here within Google. So an average person that I work with has like 5 to 10 years of experience with Google alone. So they know the company like in and out. They have been through like different reorgs. And they're absolutely very happy to share that with you. So that's something that I really love. And that's something that I've learned being here for a couple of years is like just that welcome that I felt like if there's a new person that joins our team, I make sure to like pass that same sentiment along. So I think that's very peculiar to Google, and I love that.
That is awesome. I mean, that's the thing which we have been hearing so much about Google, that its
Yeah,
culture keeps people, because when you love the company's culture, work, you just want to be part of that organization.
absolutely. Yeah, and then that's absolutely emulated in the way people are with you, especially when you're new or trying to like ramp up. So
Was there anything like a different, like when you joined there, like, oh, this is what I did not expect, or this is like, wow, oh my God, this is what people have been talking about,
yeah.
and I can just feel that. Was there something like that about any specific thing?
I think the offices, they are, oh my gosh. I mean, I'd heard that they were great, but like after my first time going into a Google office was when I got hired. And I'm always in awe of like how much investment there is behind these offices. And this is what it feels like to work for Google. So the are great. The people are great. And they said this at Amazon, but I absolutely think it's very true for Google that you're definitely not the smartest person in the room. There's obviously you're surrounded by the most smartest, like, and the most intellectual people. So it's always so amazing to hear from their stories and see how they've been around, Google for so long and learn from them. So.
Interesting. Have you ever felt like pressurized? Sometimes it happens like, we are sitting in a meeting room and there are so much, more intellectual people around you. So you feel you have to be a little careful about what you talk. Have you come across any situation like that?
I think it's very natural to feel like the imposter syndrome, right? Like that they talk of a lot, right? Like, am I like, should I even be here? Even be here? So I found myself definitely like questioning that even when I was at Amazon. I was like, oh, like, should I be here in this position? But when and my leadership has been great in being able to talk about that openly. So over here at Google, they quite often do like panels or like what they call the fireside chats, where leadership will come in front of rest of the company and basically share their experience on how they're at the position, and like how they kind of made it to that position. And in that, they would often talk about the imposter syndrome, and that's when you kind of feel like, oh, it's not just me. Everybody feels that way. And the fact that I can have that open conversation with my leadership means a lot. And I know that my manager had told me that it's common for everybody to feel that, but if you're in this position, it's because we believe in you. So it's kind of on you to like kind of embrace that and move forward with it. So yeah, imposter syndrome when you work for companies like this is a real thing. And I think what you need to do is like embrace it, in the sense, have more conversations around it, and talk to more people about it.
Great, that's really nice. So, Hita, can you walk us through your work as a finance analyst?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so the position that I first got hired for, was a very traditional FP&A role, which entails like budget setting. So right before year end in Q4, you'll do like a bottoms up budget. You'll set a bottoms up budget that this is the amount I think that my team is going to need, and then you take that to review with leadership, and then leadership will assign you the dollars. And envelope is what they call it. So that's the first aspect, is the budget that you get at the beginning of the year. And then as you proceed through the year, you'll forecast as to like how far do I think I am going to be from the budget. Now, a key element. So these are like the two traditional aspect of the role, and then the third aspect is, which is I would say like the most important aspect, is trying to mitigate any surprise spend, because now they're going to add a pressure to my budget, and having a conversation with my business partners regarding the same. A lot of time, like I support the research and development space. I recently switched my role, but I used to support the research and development department. And then mid-year, it's bound to happen that the technologies change and we need more equipment. So that might add a pressure. Then it's all about having the right conversation with your business partners about, okay, I understand that there is a pressure to my budget, but then what are we willing to give away to make sure that we meet our targets for the year. So that's one very important aspect of the job. Skills wise, I think one most important skill over there is like communication, constant communication with your business partners and with your managers on how do I feel like I'm going to land. Is it too far from the budget? You don't even want to be under budget, because then that's kind of, oh, you asked me for an X amount, why did you not use it? So you don't even want to underspend. So having those conversations with your managers, business partners and managers, is of utmost importance. In addition to that, what I also did was, for research and development group that I was working with, one of the important biggest spend was equipment. So I would do like capex spend analysis. What are my purchasing trends? What are like the headcount trends? So on and so forth. So that's a very typical FP&A role. Recently, a couple of months ago, I switched into a compliance role as a financial analyst. And in there, what I do is I so any like big project that we have. So like I was talking about an expansion project, um, we will provide a very holistic picture to the leadership. So the project that I was talking about involves uh, different teams. So that could be supply chain, operations, and each of these different departments have their own finance team. So my team's role is to kind of bring all of that information together, do a sanity check on if they're all of these components, are they like cohesive, and then provide that picture, that cohesive picture, holistic picture to the leadership. So that's kind of what I do in this role, which is not a typical financial analyst role, but nevertheless very interesting. So
That's very interesting. So, what I understand, like, it's more about like your focus is more on the budgeting side, like forecasting side, and meeting different folks from different teams and gathering all the information so that, like, you're providing a right forecast.
absolutely, and that's something that Google, as like the core function of finance, is to have a voice. And Google is very big on that. That like we are not like just some people in the back office that do number crunching. We absolutely make a decision based on the data that we are providing. And if our engineering team thinks that we want to make this purchase, finance should have an opinion and have a say in all of those decisions. So we should be their trusted advisor in proceeding with any business.
And this is, I would say, the most important question which I'm interested to know, since you have worked with two of the bigger brand like Amazon and Google. So how has been your experience, like working with these two different companies? Like,
Yeah, I think one basic difference between the two companies, like culture, obviously, right? Like we all know how like Amazon and Google's culture, like work cultures are different. Um, uh, and it's not to say like one is better over the other. It's what you see as a good fit. I had my director at Amazon who had worked for like 8+ years, which is a long time for Amazon, but then that's just kind of the culture that he thrived in, that environment. So again, it's not to say one is better over the other. I just felt like the because I said I have a very young family, the Google's culture was a more like a better fit for me. So like the good work-life balance, and just the community. I have a lot of people over here on my team and around me that have like little kids and things like that. So yeah, so similar phases of life, if you may. Uh, so I think culture is like one um, underlying difference between the two. Another is, which is very like tactical or logistical difference, is you may have heard this. Amazon doesn't do like PowerPoint presentations or like decks. They do papers. So all the decisions that you make, and I thought it was very strange in the beginning. I went into a meeting and then the first 30 minutes was silent, but that's because finance had prepared like a doc basically where we're trying to make a decision, or we're just simply talking about how we did financially in this past month. So all the leaders will get together. They'll take 30 minutes to read the paper or the doc that you shared with them. And then the next 30 minutes is to discuss the doc. So it happens live. Everybody's reading it live. So that kind of ensures that everybody is on the same page when you begin. Because in other scenarios, like it may happen that you may send a deck to the group and they may have not had the time to read it. So this kind of ensures that you've read it. Versus in Google, we do like Google Slides when we make big decisions. So that was like a key difference that I saw in how decisions are made. Regardless, they're both like data-driven decisions. So yeah, and like I said, not one is better over the other. It's what you see as a fit for yourself.
Can you tell more about those tools, which you're using in Amazon and Google?
Yeah, so we use something called MySQL at Amazon, and it's the same concept, but we call it Plex in Google. Most of the FP&A work happens in Excel or Google spreadsheets over here uh, at Google. Um, but then they have limitations in terms of how much data you could store in these Excel sheets. So then there's databases. And if you wanted to query any information from these tables or databases, you would use MySQL or you would use Plex. So these are skills that I did not have when I joined Amazon. That's something that I had to learn on the job. And the hiring manager was very understanding of it. And she's aware that not everybody's going to have the skill. But then these skills are very teachable and you can absolutely learn them on the job. So if you have these skills, great. If not, this is absolutely something that you can learn. Google and Amazon both do a great job of giving you the coaching for it. There are a lot of training sessions that happen at Google and at Amazon where you can learn the skill on the job.
Okay, that's a very useful piece of information. So, anything which you think you would like to add on, something which we missed in our conversation?
One thing I didn't mention before, and I really did this exercise, was this exercise of self-reflection. I think what's very important is even though I was not asked those questions, I definitely made sure I answered them for myself, which is why do you want to work at Google or why do you want to work at Amazon? and having that solid understanding in your mind before going to an interview, because even though you don't get asked that question, you will emulate that belief of yours through your answers. So if I really wanted to work for Amazon, or if I really wanted to work for Google, and my understanding of that is solid, it will show up in my answers. So I think that self reflection is very important. And I think that's something that they really and very highly encourage here at Google too. That every year at your your work anniversary mark, they ask you to kind of evaluate how your year was, and if are you on the right path? Are you learning the right skills? Are they fit with what you want? And the managers are very invested in making sure that what you want from your career is a good fit with you working on the team. So yeah,
That's really nice. So you in both the companies, what I understand, you do have an opportunity to move around. That's what I
absolutely.
understand, which is really
Yeah,
great because I think, and from my experience, I don't see that that is available to all other organizations. That kind of gives you overall exposure if you want to experience the different team altogether.
absolutely. I think that was in the past, before Amazon, my reason for moving out of those company was the fact that there was limited growth opportunities. But with Amazon and Google, there's almost too many of them. So it's on you to realize what is a good fit, and where could you bring your experience forth and be a true value add to the team.
Geeta, what are some common mistakes or misconception which you have come across, as a finance analyst?
I think one thing that I hear often is like you need to know SQL and Python and those kind of um, technical skills. While they are definitely A plus, like I said, they're not an absolute necessity. And if you don't have those skills, it's important for you to show in your interview that you're willing to learn those skills on the job. So if you have any examples around that, um, as to how you learned a particular skill in your past experience, definitely highlight that. Um, and another one is also the fact that, like, I see so many people around me who don't get a traditional CFA or an MBA in finance or undergrad in finance. There's so many people around me who are here from like different diverse backgrounds, and it's almost always appreciated that you have a diverse background. So yeah, those are the top two things I would say. One is you don't always need the technical skills. You have to show the willingness to show those skills. I think what they look for are those soft skills, which are you like what kind of attitude do you bring to the team? Do you have like this learning attitude? And all the other things, all the technical skills can be learned.
That's really nice. So, but it's always good to have those extra, as you said, like
Absolutely.
SQL and Python, because I see the environment right now is so competitive that everybody
Exactly.
wants, to have that coding languages learned before it has, so like their life kind of becomes more smoother when they go for a job.
Uh, but one thing I would like to add to that is if they were to really make a decision between the two candidates, in my limited experience, what I've seen is they definitely choose a candidate that has the attitude of learning. So you may have all the skills on earth that are required to do this job. But if you don't have that attitude of being able to go past that ambiguity, um, have that attitude of learning, if you don't have all of those skills, then you may be like passed for an interview. So I think over all the technical skills, what I've noticed is you need to have some of the soft skills like communication, collaboration, um, and all, and so on and so forth.
That's a very valid point, Hita. I mean, I have come across so many candidates myself meeting all the requirements, but if you don't have that kind of a personality, the soft skill to drive those skills, then it's of no use. So, yeah,
Exactly.
the most important skill is to have soft skill to drive your other skills.
Absolutely.
Hita, how do you stay, updated with the latest technology, tools, and right now AI, which is a very big buzz in the market? So how do you keep yourself updated?
Yeah, Google is very committed to being the AI first finance team. So um, they have really made sure that when we set our like annual goals, one of the goals that you set is AI related. Um, so incorporation of AI in any of the repeated tasks that you do on a daily, monthly basis. Um, but what they've also done is provided ample resources for us to learn from. So there are a lot of like training sessions that we get. There is a team that's dedicated to ensure that if you have a use case in your day-to-day work, they'll make sure that it comes to life by kind of collaborating the tech team and the finance team and bringing the AI resource to you. So yeah, I think just keeping on top of like those training sessions and ensuring that you're incorporating and again you're open to learning that technology is very important.
So, Hita, how do you balance your technical skills and soft skill in your current role? Because I think you had mentioned it a lot of time, like, you have to collaborate, but at the same point of time, like, you have to make sure technically, number wise, you have to be solid because you're a finance analyst, your number speaks everything, so how do
Yeah.
you manage that?
Yeah, exactly. You, as you rightly said, you're like, as a finance person, your integrity is tied to the numbers that you present. So definitely, it's very important. So the technical skills I feel like are easier to hone on as far as you're willing to learn. You can definitely go out there and learn from the ample like course options that these companies provide to you. There are a lot of like even outside of these companies, I feel like if you just do a Google search and go on like YouTube, a lot of courses available. LinkedIn has like some of the great courses. So those technical skills I feel like are easy to get. But for the soft skills, what I've definitely looked into recently is Google does something called G2G mentoring. So there are a lot of mentors available and willing to share their experience with somebody who's just kind of starting out within the company or just starting out their career. So I think those soft skills will come from like you observing your leaders, like how are they bringing themselves, how are they taking the decisions, how are they communicating. I think it comes from like that observing and kind of understanding what your style is. So yeah, I think that's how you kind of like balance. I think a lot of the emphasis these companies make on is the soft skills, and then technical skills are definitely something that you can adapt to and learn.
That's a great point, Hita. So make sure audience focus on your soft skill. As Hita rightly pointed out, like it's easy to learn those technical skills, but soft skill is something which takes time because it comes from within. So
Exactly.
it's more challenging to develop those soft skill.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Hita, for your time today. It was wonderful interviewing you and learning, your experiences, the challenges. I'm sure this podcast would be really helpful to our audience.
Absolutely. And thank you, Amrita, for having me over here. It's been wonderful chatting with you. And I think what you're doing is amazing for the finance community. So keep at it and thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.